Well, I'm going to be talking about brands past and present and something about marketing of gin as well. Before I start that, I thought it'd be sensible just to set the scene what's happening in the gin market. I'm sure most of you know that about 50 million cases of gin are produced every year. Half of that, or approximately, comes from the Philippines. And those in the gin trade rather discount that, and we look at the other 25 million. 11 million are drunk in America. Spain's about 3 to 4 million, I hope, looking at Desmond, of that order. In Britain, we're around 2.5 million cases. In Canada, it's just under 1 million cases. So it gives you an idea of the gin market and the main markets. In terms of what's happening to the gin market in the UK, the statistics I have go back to last year. In the off-trade, sales went down a little bit. In the on-trade, a different story. There was about 2% increase, something of that order. And in the latter part of the year, the increase was probably running at 5 or 6%. So, which is good news for the gin category. Now, I want to look at some very old brands to start off with. And I thought that the best thing was to go back to the Prohibition in America. And Maple Gin was one of the well-known gins in those days. Old Tom Gin, which has already been talked about, had been around since the early 1800s and continues to be so. But Maple Gin was a Prohibition label. And we used to have asparagus gin and gin flavour and various things. So these are obviously the great flavours of the 1920s and 1930s. So those are some of the past brands, fortunately, we don't see today. Now, moving into today's gin market, there are established brands, and most of the established brands not only have a great history, but they also have a family behind them. And Beefeater has a family behind it, James Burrow. And for those of you who don't know, James Burrow was my great-grandfather. So I know a little bit about it, and Desmond will correct me when I'm wrong. He's the Beefeater distillery and ambassador. There's Burnett's, which you don't often see so much today. Gilbeys, you might see more travelling around the world in the UK. Gordon's, well, that's worldwide. Greenall's, Plymouth, Seagram's, and Tanqueray. All of them have a history and a family behind them. Gilbeys Gin was founded in 1857 by Walter and Alfred Gilbey. Their original distillery was in Camden Town, started in the late 1870s. And those who know about it, Gilbeys Gin has been distilled in various places around the world. Whether it's a London dry gin, it's produced in different countries. And today it's owned by Diageo. It's not a brand you see very much today. It's at the lower. It used to be much more popular than it is today. Gordon's Gin was originally located in Southwark. It was sold to the Curry family in the late 1870s, and in 1898, Gordon's and Tanqueray came together. They were in Goswell Road. They were bombed during the war. The old Tom still survived that, and they rebuilt the distillery in 1950 or thereabouts. And then they moved out to Basildon in Essex in 1989 from memory, and now they're up in Scotland. And you remember the Gordon's bottle, the distinct shake, it's like a shaker cocktail. That's always been one of their strong branding points. Greenall's, well, look at the label, it says 1761, but the family actually didn't purchase it until 1870. They had a major fire in 2005, as many of you will know. It's no longer family owned, it's now privately owned by some individuals and private equity. Plymouth Chin is now owned by Pernod Ricard, goes back to 1793. The family behind that was the Coates family, and since then it's been owned by a number of people and companies. It's really had quite a mixed history. Plymouth used to be quite a large brand, then it went down, it's now come back up again. And a lot of the recent success is down to, in my opinion, to one man, that was Charles Rolls, some of you will know. Today he's involved in Fever Tree. Now, he was very clever. When he bought Plymouth Chin, I think it was doing probably 10, 15,000 cases a year in the UK and a little bit overseas. One of his great marketing strengths was he was a pilot. And he used to pick up the journalists at Red Hill in Surrey and fly them down to Plymouth for the day. He gave them personal attention, gave them a special trip, and that certainly helped Plymouth on its way. And the other great thing about Plymouth was, some of you remember a spirits expert, Gilly Gooden, on a BBC programme. She picked up a glass of Plymouth Chin. That's the best gin I've ever tasted. And that certainly put Plymouth on the market. So they've had some of that. And also Charles was extremely good on PR as well. The PR that Plymouth got was way, way above what their brand sales demanded. Tanqueray, it's a great brand today, a leading brand today, established in 1838 in Bloomsbury. Again, it's got a history, all based in London, came together with Gordon's and then became part of the Distillers Company in 1922 and now Diageo today. Again, they are a very strong company. And if you have a chance, go and have a look at a range of what they've done with their bottles and their labels, how they developed it over the year to strengthen their brand. Seagram's, well, we don't really hear of Seagram's in the UK. Seagram's was owned by the Bronfman family and Seagram's back in the end of last century. It's really quite a large brand. I think it does about 4.5 million cases. Is it owned by Pernod Ricard? Yes. It is. It's owned by Pernod Ricard. And it's very strong in North America, but it is creeping over into Europe. And they've developed their brand by adding flavours, apple twisted gin. I think they did a grapefruit flavour as well at one stage too. But it has a Canadian history. Now, Beefeater. I know a little bit about Beefeater. My great-grandfather had been in America and Canada. He was born in Devon, went over there, then came back and bought a drinks company in 1863. And at some stage, shortly after that, he created the brand Beefeater. You have to remember, probably when he bought his drinks company, it fitted in a third of the size of this room. It wasn't a very large company. And it's interesting what they've done over the years. After the Second World War, if Beefeater sold, I think it was 500 cases a month. It may have been Beefeater and other products. They used to put the flags up. That was a great month. By the mid-60s, they were doing a quarter, then up to 1 million cases to the USA. So that was a big jump. And back in the 1950s, if you look at some of the labels, you will see that the word Burroughs was much bigger than the word Beefeater. It wasn't, and in the 1950s, we used to have one bottle for the UK and another bottle for the world. The UK bottle, believe it or not, had a plastic stopper, which was sort of quite modern, but maybe being a little bit dangerous in terms of contamination. And then eventually the Burroughs part disappeared from the label and Beefeater came the main thing. And the Beefeater label was changed a few times, never particularly strongly. Now, there's one famous occasion I think it was in the late 1970s, when we were having some work done on the Beefeater man walking across the label. And I can remember going to a presentation, and the guy doing the label said, "Do you realise, guys, your Beefeater man is walking backwards, not forwards. And perhaps that's why your brand isn't doing quite as well as you think it should be." So we had to change it, so you looked that he was moving forwards rather than backwards. But we've always retained the square. We always retain the square bottle and other things. Now, in terms of marketing Beefeater, one of the latest things is, and I was there last week, was the opening of their visitor centre. Go and see it. I can tell you that. I know it's an advert for Beefeater, but go and see the Beefeater visitor centre. Not only does it give you good information about the history of gin and how that's developed, but also about the brand and its own development. And I do strongly recommend that you go there. You will learn a lot about gin and marketing in those days. Burnett's. White Satin. When I joined the gin trade in the late 60s, early 70s, White Satin was quite a large brand. It was quite dominant in the supermarkets. It was originally based near Vauxhall. It really had a roller coaster. It had great sales, and today it's owned by Heaven Hill. So there's a mixture of the established gin brands, some that are still very strong today, some that may have disappeared. When the Gin and Trade Vodka Association celebrated its 50th anniversary, and Edwin Atkinson, I think, were you there at the time? No, just before you. We actually had a meeting of some of the gin families, had a lunch with some of the gin families together, and we actually managed to find a Mr. Burnett to come and join us. We had Burnett's, Gilbeys, Beefeater, we had John Tanqueray from Tanqueray, and one other whose name I forget. Now, some of the lost gin brands, the missing man was Mr. Nicholson. If you're around in the 1910s, 1920s, Nicholson's gin was quite a large brand in the UK. And again, in the 60s and 70s, booze was quite well known. Some of you remember, or won't remember, booze was actually yellow colour. And the story I was always told why it was yellow was that when they were making booze one day, there was a chap working the distillery who put it in a cask, and it turned yellow. And they thought this is a great idea, how we can differentiate ourselves from others. Sadly, Nicholson's, there are some new owners. Hopefully they will do something with it. But Nicholson used to be quite a strong brand. It's been the family owned it for a long time. The Nicholson family is still alive and kicking, but no longer involved. They also own pubs and a little bit like gin palaces, I guess. But it's a brand we really don't see today. Maybe we will in the future. Booze, and the booze also used to have a second brand called House of Lords. Those have really disappeared. You may just see them very occasionally. But they are two lost brands. Now, what are the most recent gin brands? Well, Bombay Gin, or Bombay Sapphire. Bombay Gin probably goes back to about, I think, the 1960s from memory. Bombay Gin was created in 1987. And Hendricks, which is owned by the Grants family, is the mid-90s. And probably those two gins, perhaps Bombay Sapphire, and as you know, the sapphire it's given the name sapphire after a sapphire, blue sapphire, or blue-violet sapphire, that came from Sri Lanka. That's why you have the distinctive blue bottle. And Bombay and Hendricks probably have done more between them, combined with the others, to rebuild the gin category and give us a renaissance in the last 15 or 16 years. And then there are a number of new brands, some who are represented today. I don't intend to go through them. They all have their own distinctive characters, be it in taste, bottle shape, history, whatever it may be. But those you will be familiar with those, and there are many more. I don't know how many there are today, but it's over 100, I guess, if not considering more than that. And again, with the renaissance in gin, people gone retro, looking at the back, and all seeing what else they can do with gin and be innovative. And with Old Tom Gin in the last 10 years, there are 3 brands that have come to the fore. There's Jensen's, there's our own, and there's Ransom's, and that's created interest throughout the world, particularly with bartenders and cocktails. I'll come on to that. Slow gin's been around for years, and when I joined the gin trade a good number of years ago, we were making slow gin at Beefeater. But again, you know, you've got Gordon's, ourselves, Plymouth, and there are a great number of others. But that has really helped to get people interested in slow gin. People are learning how to use it and enjoy it. And we have other specialist gins. We've got organic gin, juniper green, and there's many more. We've got cask gins, and no, please talk to Desmond about Burroughs Reserves. We've got Hayman's 1850, and there are many more. There's been a lot of cask gins in America. You have to take cask gin in a very wide sense in terms of how people are using it. And then you've got special gins. You've got Martin Miller's. They bring in water from Iceland to dilute it. There's Right Gin that comes from Sweden, and you've got Rogue nice name for a gin. Rogue Spruce gin that comes from America, and then there's a liqueur gin as well. So the gin category is expanding very fast, and it's been Hendricks and Bombay combined, plus craft distilling in America, which is now coming over here. It's great to see a number of new distillers in this country in the last 10 years or so, and the general interest in gin itself is making the category very exciting at the present. Now I'm going to move on to some comments about marketing. Now let's just talk about gin itself. I always think there was a lost generation of gin drinkers, and vodka stole the market to a certain extent. And that lost generation is beginning to understand or begin to realise there is another spirit in the world called gin. And they were probably the drinkers of the 80s and 90s and a touch of the 2000s. Again, the Renaissance was driven by Bombay and Hendricks, and also the other comments I've made, and development of the craft distilling, developing different gin recipes, use of different botanicals, which we'll come on to later on in today. There's been great innovation in the gin sales. It's been a great effort by gin distillers throughout the world to renovate and increase the interest in gin. Now, gin serve is incredibly important from a marketing point of view. I'm sure there's some bartenders in the audience today, but bartenders today, they're interested in gin, understanding how it's made, the history of it, the history of cocktails. It's so superb today compared with 10 years ago. You know, we used to look at one day as bartenders as the wine experts of the world. Today they are the gin experts of the world, knowing how to handle it. And they have played a major part in helping with the renaissance of gin. Education, well, there's hardly a week these days when you don't open a newspaper and see an article about gin. It's tremendous in the last 5 years. It's come exciting. It's mentioned on television, in radio programs, about several last year. Gin is very much in people's minds, and education. And there's a hunger to understand how gin is made. Tonic water. Well, when I was introduced into gin and tonics a good number of years ago now, there was only probably one tonic, and that was Schweppes. And I think there was another one called C&C, Cochrane and Cantrell, or something like that. Now, the tonic manufacturers and tonic world have changed that. We have a splendid choice of tonic waters today, different tastes, and you can go into a bar these days and you often get a gin and tonic menu. What gin would you like and what tonics would you like? Fever Tree, what's the one starting with? Fentimans, 1724, and others. No, there's been a renaissance in the tonic world. And I think education and what's to happen in tonic has been very important. Because today, when you go and ask for a gin and tonic, you get a great gin and tonic. You haven't got barmen using guns. Very rarely do they use guns. They have a bottle of tonic, a quality tonic, and they're proud to be serving that. They garnish the gin and tonics with ice, or be it with mint, or squeeze of lemon, or some orange skin, whatever it may be. They make it a theatre. I can always remember when I went to Japan for the first time, and it was about 10 years ago. And I went into a very small bar, and I said, I'd like a martini, please. I was so impressed the way that barman made that to me. He made it in front of me. He got the ice. He shaped the ice, literally shaped the ice with knives into like a diamond shape from memory. Did about 3 or 4 of those. He put them in the glass. He then chose his gin carefully, chose his vermouth and everything like that. It was theatre. It was fantastic. And it's great to watch it. So when you came to drink it, it even tasted better. And there's no doubt the bartenders throughout the world are doing the same thing. They are really working hard to help us sell more gin. And classic cocktails, they're all coming back, because bartenders are so interested in knowing about classic cocktails, the history of them, how to make them. And that has been very important in the renaissance of gin. And all gin distillers, we all know we go and talk to bartenders and try and persuade them to use our gin rather than our competitors. So it has been a complete revolution in the way that gin is served in the last 5 years, be it gin and tonic, be it a martini, be it a classic cocktail, whatever it may be. But also is in the choice of glassware. You know, sometimes you just get very boring glasses for gin and tonic. It's a bit more exciting. You go to Spain, you get a lovely sort of like a very large red wine brandy glass. And I think gin in Spain, 80% of gin is drunk as a gin and tonic. You've got different cocktails, glasses in America. Burroughs Reserve, in fact, at the opening last week, we were all given a taste of Burroughs Reserve. And they've got their own glass for drinking, sipping, I should use, shouldn't I? Sipping Burroughs Reserve. So if you put all those things together, and what has happened in the last 5 to 10 years, it has greatly helped the renaissance in gin. And all these items are very important in terms of getting your marketing mix right if you are a brand owner. Now, major brands innovate. Well, I put it out there and thought about it. I think a lot of the innovation has actually come from the craft distilling movement and new distillers. And you know, we know Gordon's have brought out a cucumber one, but I wonder where they got that idea from. Might have been something to do with Hendrix and others. But it's all important that they are that the large brands are listening and watching what smaller gin distillers are doing and in innovation. And so innovation is very important. Provenance, you know, if your brand has a history and has a real history, people are pleased to hear that. You know, make the full use of your history. I know I'm biased, but Beefeater has a great industry. My own gin can use that history as well. So we have a history that we can do. And you know, there's a great strength to the gin category. The whole gin category has had a great history. It goes back many years, back to the late 1600s, and before that, some people attach it to a Dutch gin as well. As a category, you've got a tremendous history, which we can all use in terms of how we market our products. So I actually think we are very lucky to be working in the gin trade. It's making gin, it's a great product, and there's great work going on throughout the trade to make it even better. Plenty of history to call upon, increasing innovation, which we can use to market our products, and what better than nothing else, great excitement in the gin category. I think I've been in the gin trade for 40 years. I think it's one of the most exciting times ever to be in the gin trade in terms of the innovation going on and the worldwide interest. So I hope I've given you some idea of the present brands, some that we no longer see today, and then some of the things that go into the marketing mix for a brand.